Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The FCC has launched a new help center for their broadband data collection process. So if you are an internet service provider, this is something you need to know about. I'll be right back, we'll talk about it. Thanks for joining me. This is Rick Uzzi with the Quorum for Broadband Deployment News. So the FCC is going to be collecting data from every single broadband service provider, internet service provider in the country. The filing window for that is the end of this month, June 30th through September 1st. So during that time, every single service provider needs to upload their serviceable location information. So basically it's their service area that they cover, and it has to be down to an address by address location. So prior to that, service providers would upload what was called Form 477, and it was basically just by census tract, and if it might have even been, it might have even been census block. So if a service provider said, yeah, we provide service at this speed in this census block, then that was determined served by the FCC. Well, obviously that provided some bad data, because it left these holes of areas that really were not covered in that census tract. So we couldn't really determine who was served and unserved. So regardless of whether you're going to be taking any broadband funds, whether you're going to be looking at getting broadband funds through some existing program or the future programs that are out there with the bipartisan infrastructure law and the BEAD program, this applies to you regardless of whether you're taking any funds. Every single service provider has to do this. Again, the window is between the end of this month, June 30th through September 1st. There's a specific format that you have to use in order to do this. It can be a little bit complicated, but they now have a help center. And the FCC has put together this help portal or this help site that will guide you through that, as well as some tutorial videos that I think will be very helpful. So I was going to look at some of that, and at the end of this video I'm going to link to the help site as well as to a video that explains what I think to me was going to be the most difficult part for an ISP, which is how do I take what I have and put it in a format the FCC is going to accept, because they will not accept a street address. They will not accept a geographic coordinate, lat long. They only will accept their location IDs. So you have to determine, how do I make my addresses conform to their location IDs? Well, there's a tutorial on how to do that. So I will point to that, and specifically to the point where they go through that. So first let's take a look here at the site. So this is what it looks like. And again, I will link to this after the video. So you've got here different places you can click. This is availability data. And unfortunately, these links, there's lots of links, so you can look through these. Unfortunately, they're not in any kind of a chronological kind of order. In other words, first do this, then look at this, then look at this. They're all just alphabetical. So you're just going to have to search through here and see what you may need. But again, there's lots of information up here. So that's availability data, then subscription data, some more links about that. Then we've got up here the location fabric. So this is where you would go get the fabric, and I'll talk about what that is here in a minute. So this provides that kind of information. You need to have certain specific information in place so that you can request that fabric. In fact, I believe you would have gotten an email maybe already to whoever the person was that normally files your 477 data for the FCC. May have already gotten an email with information about getting that link. There's some video resources that are real good up here. They do go through some things. And then this last video, this is the one I'm going to link to in a specific spot where it talks about converting those location IDs or addresses into location IDs. So I will talk about that in a minute as well. And then the data specification, and that's a big ugly, is this it? Yeah, that's a big ugly document that you're more than welcome to read through. It's basically documentation that's up there. And then we've got the Form 477 resources. Again, that's the form that's already required. So this is going to be a biannual process of doing this. So this is the kind of thing that we're starting this at the end of the month. It's going to be something that you're going to do twice a year, and eventually, I don't think it'll be too long where this replaces the Form 477 stuff. As far as I think, anyway, I think that's the idea, is that they're probably going to be collecting both for a while and maybe compare and see how stuff matches, but eventually I think this is the process that's going to replace that, because they really want to get down to the location, or the serviceable location, or the address information. So those are your main things. There's a nice search thing up here. You can search for stuff. And then right here you'll see this says submit a request. That basically, and you got the same thing down here, that will send an email to their help team. I've already sent one because I did have a question about, hey, listen, if I'm an ISP and I know where all of my addresses are, and you've got your fabric that's got all the locations, how in the world do I compare those two things? They sent me back some links to help, which did not help, really, because I looked through it. It's like, this doesn't really answer my question. But then I did find that video that specifically answered that, and I'll again link to that. So the way this again works is that right now, currently, there's a preliminary fabric that's available, and the FCC, in their public notice that came out, I think in April, and I did a video about that when that public notice came out, they said, we strongly encourage every single service provider to right now start working on this, because there's a preliminary data fabric out right now, and you can experiment with that and play with that. And that fabric, what it is, it's basically the underlying, it's a fabric, the underlying basis of where all of these serviceable locations are going to be held. So there's a company that the FCC contracted with that's created this fabric, and it is basically every single broadband serviceable location in the United States, and I'm assuming in territories as well, since some of that's going to be covered by the broadband maps, I assume. So, so a serviceable location would be somewhere that should be getting broadband. A non-serviceable location, I'm assuming, is something like a parking lot, where it's like, okay, there's a parking lot here, it's an area on the map, but there's no reason to put broadband there. But a home, business, apartment building, those kinds of things, those are all serviceable locations. So the point is to try to get from every single broadband provider their serviceable locations, compare them to what the fabric says. The fabric's got a bunch of locations, the ISP has a bunch of locations that they serve, and the point is to put those two things together. Every single service provider has to upload their information on the speed that they're offering, the maximum speed at every address. You don't have to upload every speed, just the maximum speed that you offer. Your latency, and that's just a yes or no, or really it's a true or false. Am I under 100 milliseconds round trip? And that would be a true, then it's low latency. So that's not very low. That's actually, most people can meet that. What else? I'll show you here in a minute what everything that's required. So in fact, let's take a look at that. So this is one of the help files on here. Let me make that a lot bigger. What is a location fabric and preliminary location fabric? So again, the preliminary one is for testing or playing with. You're not going to take, you're going to have to do this twice, right? Because you really want to do it the first time to get used to everything you have to do and to figure it all out. Because you only got that limited filing window, and you can't be late. If you're late, you're going to be penalized, and you will be penalized because the fact that this preliminary fabric is out, the FCC specifically in their public notice came out and said there's going to be a really high hurdle for any waivers on somebody that can't make the deadline, because we're making this preliminary fabric available. We're providing lots of help, like this site and these tutorials, for people to be able to get this done. So it doesn't matter. I mean, you're going to have a really high hurdle to be able to say, hey, I couldn't get this done. So the preliminary fabric is there specifically so that you can play around with it, figure out how you need to get your data in there, and then once that's all figured out, as soon as the filing window is open, then you can basically duplicate that process. You can't completely duplicate everything because not everything is the same. They specifically say that the addresses, the serviceable locations right now, everything I think is listed as serviceable in the preliminary fabric, but that's not going to be the case in the production fabric. Also, the location IDs are completely different. They start with a 9 in the preliminary fabric, but it starts with a 1 in the production fabric, so you can't use the same location IDs. So you're going to have to basically practice, figure it all out, and you got to do it again. So you can see here what's in and not in the preliminary fabric. So this is what's in it. So when you look at the fabric, and it's a CSV file when you download it, you're going to see that there's this location ID. It's unique. The Commission issued identifier for each location, and you can see that the one in the preliminary fabric will not be consistent with the one in the production version of the fabric. And they've got geographic coordinates, basically your lat and long, so that's in there. So that's telling you a point on the map. Then there is hopefully a street address, kind of a physical address. It does say that some locations in the fabric do not have an address associated with them, in which case some or all of these fields will be null. And again, this information will change from the preliminary fabric to the production fabric because I'm sure they're still tweaking addresses. Unit count, that would be for MDUs, MTUs, buildings with multiple units, apartment buildings, condominiums, I'm assuming maybe office buildings. And it says in here, in the preliminary fabric, this field is not populated, so it's intentionally left blank. But in the production fabric, I guess there might be something like says 110 as far as number of units in that building, something like that. Building type code, a flag identifying whether it's business, residential, or both. And then the census geographies, data includes the county and census block in which the location falls. Then you can see here some examples. So again, your location ID in the preliminary one, again, it starts with a 9. You got your address, so your typical address stuff like street address, city, state, zip suffix, and then again, this may or may not be available. If it's not available, I'm not sure what you do unless you maybe have to go by the Latin long of a location. Then you've got unit count. Again, that's going to be blank in the preliminary, but there will be information there on the number of units. BSL flag, whether the location is broadband serviceable or not. I believe in the preliminary fabric it's saying, does it say it right here? It doesn't, but I believe I read where in the preliminary fabric everything's going to be true. So it's going to say everything is broadband serviceable, but in the production fabric there will be some areas like I mentioned, like maybe a parking lot or some other areas that are on the map, but they're not serviceable locations. Building type code, again, that would be residential, business, or it would be X if it's both. Land use code, okay, I'm not sure what that is. I don't remember reading about that. Address confidence code, code indicating the confidence in the association of the address with the location. Country geo, county geo ID, block geo ID, H3, Latin and long. So there's a few other things in there. Then it tells you how to address it, where you have questions, that kind of thing. And then there's a specific video down here. And this is actually the same video I was talking about that provides the good overview of how to take their location ID and make it into, or compare it to the addresses that you have. Here's an article on how to format the fixed broadband availability location lists. This is showing what you will have to present. So, you know, when you upload your information, there's two ways you can upload it. You can upload it as a Excel CSV, or really a CSV file. You can format it in Excel, upload it as a CSV. Or you can upload shape files that are going to include the same information for the most part. So again, you're going to have the location ID. They will not accept, by the way, your address or the lat long. So you cannot say, well, here's the addresses I serve and just send them a bunch of addresses. You've got to convert your addresses into a location ID. So you've got to have the location ID, the technology, and you can see they've got codes for that. So if you are a fiber, optical fiber carrier, that would be a 50. If you're a cable company, that would be a 40. So you're going to put whatever that is. In this case, they said it was 50, so that'd be a fiber provider. Maximum advertised download speed. Again, in this case, they're saying that they're providing, let's say, a gig. And then there's some specifics here on, you know, if you're going to be really low speeds, like if the max download speed is greater than 200 but less than 10, and blah, blah, blah. You know, again, this is all covered in that video, so you should look at that. And then your upload speed, same thing. In this case, I guess it's a gig symmetrical, so that's just the example. Latency, again, this is a true or a false, and anything less than or equal to 100 milliseconds based on the 95th percentile. So this would be if, you know, most of the time you're under 100 milliseconds, then you can check that off as true. And that's going to be the case for most service providers. The only issue is going to be is if you're having congestion, serious congestion on your network, is that a problem? But most technologies, cable, fiber, obviously, cable, fixed wireless are all going to be well under that 100 milliseconds, as is low Earth orbit satellites. Now, geosynchronous satellites can be well above that, so that would be considered high latency. Business residential category is going to be, again, your B, your R, your X. So when you upload that, actually that's, when you put that in the system, it's going to look kind of like this. So this is how that'd be formatted again. This is just a snip from their video. So you got your location ID, your provider. I guess you'll have a provider ID based on maybe what you file with the FCC. You can have a brand name of your service, your ISP. So in this case, Virginia Fixed Broadband LLC. Your technology 40, and if you think back to what we were just looking at, that would be cable service. That's the code for cable. Again, the speeds are gig by a gig. It's low latency. The 1 is a true, and then the X would mean this is a location that is both business and residential. This would be what the fabric looks like. So when you download the fabric, again, it's in a CSV file. This is going to be the kind of thing that you're going to be looking at. So you got your location ID. Again, this is the preliminary because it starts with a 9. You've got an address, hopefully. This is, New York, Pennsylvania, etc. Zip code, zip suffix, and again, this unit count is blank on all of these. These could all be residential addresses. I don't know if it would be a 1 maybe if it's just a home, but in any event, it's all blank in the preliminary fabric. Then you've got your BSL, that would be is this a broadband serviceable location? And again, everything in the preliminary fabric is going to be true. Some of these might be false, I guess, in the production fabric in your area. What type of building, land use? Is it business, residential, or is there an X? If it were an X, that would be both. Land use, that's the land use and the county stuff we were talking about, and the block stuff that didn't quite know what that's not covered in the video, and I don't know. I'm sure there's information on that. Then you got the lat and the long right there. So that's the kind of information that you will get out of the fabric. So you need to take that information, and then you need to take your service area, and this is what your service area consists of: everywhere that you are providing service and everywhere that you can provide service with what they're calling a standard installation. And a standard installation would be that somebody calls you up and say, hey, I'd like an internet connection, and you say, sure, we'll be out on Tuesday next week. But really, the period is supposed to be like 10 days, but obviously it might be that you're backed up and it might take 14 days. But it's, can you install that customer within, let's say, 10 days or so with a standard installation, meaning that you don't have to charge them for for building out your fiber to get to their place. Sometimes you're not quite there, and that long driveway problem, and you tell them, hey, it's going to cost you $3,000 for us to cover the rest of that ground. And that's part of what we're trying to overcome with the broadband funds that are coming, are all those locations where it's like the service provider's like, I can't really afford to provide service to this person because it's going to cost me a fortune. So if they want to pay for it, they want to pay me $3,000 to extend that fiber out to where I can get to their home, then I'll do that. But it's basically a standard kind of drop. It's like if you haven't provided service there before, you can do it, and you can get it done within, let's say, 10 days. So that would be what you're going to be loading in here, would be where you're providing service and where you can provide service with a standard installation. So it's not just your customer list. So you have to have a list of all of your prospective customers as well. Basically, customers and prospective customers, that's your service area. And then once you have that, you need to take that information and you need to turn it into this number. So in the fabric, you've got both. You've got the location, and hopefully, they said it's not available for everything. Hopefully you've got an address, and maybe where they don't have an address would be a non-serviceable location, I hope. But obviously if there's no address, then I guess you're limited to getting a lat and long and trying to figure it out. But in general, there is a video. Let me see what I had over here. I talked about that. Yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. So in the video, they do explain how, and this was what I thought would be really complicated, but they do explain how, using Excel, that you can do some text matching, because you've got your address in your list and they've got their address in their list, hopefully, again, for every serviceable location, and that you can match the two using text matching in Excel, doing VLOOKUP. And then there's also, you'll look up here, there's also something that you can download, like an extension or an add-on. It's an add-on for Excel called Fuzzy Lookup that you can download. So what Fuzzy Lookup does, did I get a screenshot of that? I don't think I did. I did not. So what Fuzzy Lookup will do is it will take two addresses, and if they're close, then it will assume that they're the same, and it will tell you, hey, these look the same, and here's our confidence level. So it might be STREET or ST, but everything else looks the same, and it'll say, well, this is like 98% confident level. that these are the same address. So you can look at those, look at the confidence level. So you can kind of match these things. And you can do this all through Excel. So that is the way that a lot of people are going to do it, is they're going to try to take this CSV file, this Fabric data. They're going to take their own customer information. You're going to have to create a spreadsheet, obviously, that's got the maximum speed and the other stuff that they're looking for. This information here, again, you got to create that. But before you do that, you've got to, again, coordinate your addresses with the location ID. And again, this video that I'm going to post at the end here explains how to do that using this Excel text matching. And it does a pretty good job. I mean, I had never done that before, and I haven't tried it, but it does kind of go through it. So it's going to take a little while for you to look at it and figure everything out, but it is something that can be done. So that's the way a lot of people are going to do this. They're going to go ahead and try to sync up the CSV file that they get off of the Fabric and their own CSV file that shows everywhere that they can provide service, sync those up, and then come up with that as being the what they work with, and then add in their own data as far as, you know, what speeds they're providing at each location. Now, if you're providing two different kinds of service at a location, maybe you are providing cable modem service at an address, but it also happens that you've got fixed wireless that's covering part of that area and, let's say, a whole nother area. If you actually can provide both kinds of service to that area, then you have to have two separate line items for that. You can't have the same, you know, you can't put them both in the same place. So just be aware of that. Let's see, then you've got, the other thing that people can do is they can create a Polygon file, it's basically a shape file that looks at the map data and says, okay, you can kind of then create a polygon around the serviceable locations and say, yes, I do serve all these areas. And then there you've got to have the data as well on speeds covered. You'd have to have two different Polygon files if you've got two different kinds of service, like cable modem service and fiber, that are overlapping. But on any areas that are not overlapping, it's all going to be that one file. So this is an example where they're using something called QGIS. That's an open source GIS system, and basically they sucked in the data from the Fabric, the CSV file from the Fabric, and they sucked that in there. And then they went to this XYZ tiles thing here, and they dropped that down, and they pulled up OpenStreetMap, which is an open source mapping system. So you can see they just kind of plotted the points that come up with the GIS system on a layer, on a map layer, and then you've got this. And then from there, you can look at your service area, and it's probably pretty easy. Like, let's say you are covering this area, you can say, okay, well, in this area, all around here, we're providing symmetrical gig service. Out here, we're providing, maybe we don't have fiber going out here, maybe this is fixed wireless, and we're providing 200 megabits per second fixed wireless, something like that. So you can then, using this system, and I don't know how to do the polygons, sorry, but I guess you can create the polygons, which would be these lines that you're going to create around these areas that are going to contain the data, the location data, as well as the information about what you're providing in that area. So some folks are going to be doing this. This is going to be easier, I think, to just kind of look at the map and then draw the little areas around. Okay, I'm in this area, I'm providing service here, and here's my shape file, and you upload that. And there's information about that in the video as well, and there's other help sources about how to do shape files. So I think this site will be very, very helpful for anyone that is going to have to be going through this process, which is every single, certainly fixed wireline service provider, and mobile providers, I think, have to do this as well, to go through this whole process. So if this was helpful, please give me a like on the video and subscribe if you're not subscribed. Ring the little bell. Again, I will, as soon as this is over, post a link to the video, specifically at the spot where it starts talking about how to match that data up. Because again, I thought that was going to be the most difficult part. It is, I think. It's going to be the most difficult part still, even with all that going on, for service providers in figuring out, well, number one, they've got to figure out where they're providing service. Maybe that is hard for some people. I think it depends on the size of the operator. Small operators might not even know completely where their service area is. Maybe they're not doing that much marketing. They just know, okay, we're out over by Main Street, and then we go past that, down that road somewhere, but we don't know exactly. I don't know. Maybe they do know. Maybe they know, but do they have that all in a list? So you're going to have that list of locations first, your own addresses that you do. Then you have to take the FCC location IDs and match that all up. I think that matching part was a real mystery to me. How do you do that in Excel? Well, they explain all of that. So that's the good news. Thanks again. I'll be back tomorrow with broadband deployment news. Take care. Bye-bye.